So I wanted to do an updated Flail guide. Flail has a lot of variants at this point that are viable. People play it with VG, they play it with BB, they play it with IG. Some people have even got more creative with that. I think it's possible to play with this SNS, but the base guide for every single build is the same, or like what you actually need to run. In terms of stats, usually you're looking to hit 350 con, and then you're looking to hit 250 focus with basically every build. You can be greedier than that and go for 350 focus. This is like a CDR kind of build, but it feels awkward right now because it's so clumpy. I think for OPR like 350, 250 more, but like for war I prefer to go 350 con, 250 focus instead of 350 focus, 250 con. So that's like the first main thing with it. The gear itself, you have options. I think the best way to build this is the Invig stack with a kite shield still. Some people don't like the kite shield because you could stagger someone with or not with the deflecting frailty, but with arcane smite, and then they can get a light roll, kind of get out. And that's just not ideal. But as long as you use smite defensively, I think it's good. And what I mean by that is like, if you're like running to chase someone down and you smite them while other people are CCing them, that's a bad idea because you're just gonna give them the dodge roll and then get out. But if they're like actively like coming towards you, like they're trying to clump on top of you, when they go into Maelstrom, Maelstrom in particular, and I'm just generally saying this towards Great Axe because it's the main thing you can counter very easily. It has, where is it? It has grit during the startup, but when it actually is going off and doing damage, it doesn't have grit, so you could basically stagger someone out of Maelstrom, and even at that point, if they get a free dodge roll, they effectively do no damage, so I still think it's like worth running if you play for that circumstance, but if you time it wrong, it's bad. But I still think it's generally worth going for. The other nice part about having a kite shield is it gives you more refreshing inherent to your kit, and this is like a build that I think is really good for, like, a really good candidate for refreshing stacking. By that I mean go for refreshing, go kite shield, go 50 focus, you end up with like 25.5% passive CDR, and you have a lot of active CDR options too. If you go shield of suppression, you can pick up this is a 200 weaponsmithing kite shield, pick up refreshing ward, pick up slash shield ward, you become really tanky, you have some active CDR. And then in terms of gear itself, I would recommend Invig stacking with the refreshing, just because it's inherent to a build that has kite shield, you might as well take advantage of it. And if you do Invig stacking, with this like idea of like your kite shield, you're gonna have an extra 10% Invig, you could go for like the Invig helmet that you can get that's for medium. It's not insane, like it's an option. The other thing I think is generally better is like you just go for freedom pants. Some people have been trying Void Darkblade, experimenting with it. Doesn't seem like it's gained a ton of momentum. Unmoved is also interesting, but I don't think it's like super consistent. But freedom pants just seem like it's just fine. Like you end up with the enchanted ward or freedom, both of which aren't super useful, but they're okay. In terms of the gear otherwise, usually picking up a few like slash conditionings is always nice. You can throw on Shirking Fort. You can kind of go whatever for the last brick. It honestly doesn't really matter. Like Elemental Aversion's fine. Just kind of pick up whatever gear you can get. And depending on what your chosen offhand is, you usually have one slot open for those like weapon perks. Nullifying Oblivion, for example, for VG. If you're IG, you might put Deadly Frost and IG, Healing Tomb on your boots. Another thing that's like kind of popular too is going for like one piece of Crowded Bludge. So that's what I've been doing like more recently. This VG build's a little bit more dated on this side. I've been going to IG and the BB builds a little bit more. And Crowded Bludge just allows you to basically spam Bludge, and Bludge is like kind of your bread and butter. It's like your best ability. Bludge, I think some people have even debated cutting it, but I think it's the best ability now for sure. Best Friends is just a flat source of damage reduction that applies to multiple people, not just one person. You just can't see it inherently super easily because the game is not great at like showing the actual visual effect, but it can apply to multiple people. It effectively gives people the equivalent of having, how many gem slots is it? It'd be 5 per each, I believe, or is it more than that? I think it's the, let's see, it's 10% damage taken is reduced, so that's 4 gems to each, so it's like 8 gem slots. It's effectively like you have a whole nother gem slot like equipped just because you use that ability, and it's just like a really easy way to become very tanky, and it just is super strong with Bludge because then you can use it more often. You just wouldn't be holding it for when the big clumps happen, and then you would just dump it there. Works both well in OPR and in war, but within smaller scale, you definitely don't get as much value out of crowded bludge as you do in like a war situation. In terms of the actual tree, this is what I run. Some people do like a few different things. Press of Advantage is really interesting for modes where you don't have IGVG like super present, because it's just a good like a passive divine like effect, and it's just pretty easy to trigger realistically now if you go for like these refreshing stacking sort of builds, and it's just like another sleeper thing. Arcane Smite, the more people you hit with it, the more cooldown reduction you're gonna get, the less that's gonna be in terms of cooldown too. Vortex is working very well now with the haste. Smite's working now with deflecting frailty. Like there's not a lot that's like not to like about this build. It's just like it's just working now, feels good, kind of very flowy, very functional, and there's a lot of different ways to run it. But yeah, that's like kind of the heart of the build, is like going through the gear there. Your offhand is really flexible. My favorite for just being super aggressive is the IG. This one you can be more aggressive with. You can just drop shower basically off cooldown. It has a really unique aspect where you can basically go infinite on your ice shower as long as you cast the first one within an effect, just from the inherent passives of the reducing effects from refreshing frost. Sometimes it like kind of bugs out and you can't go infinite, but usually you can go infinite with it in a war situation, and just dumping more ice showers is generally always good. This is what I usually run for IG tree, super util oriented, and it's just like super strong. But in terms of like other things that are like a little bit greedier, a little bit more value in terms of like solo potential, Pestilence is really interesting. I don't run it with an actual way to make it actually do damage. I just play it for pure utility because Blighted Enchantment is just that good. It just gives the ult relatively fast, a little bit slower than IG, a little bit slower than VG, but still like good value. A Crippling Blast Shot is just a kind of a cheesy way to cheese someone out of a clump fight. Like if a Great Axe goes for a grab, I see them going for a grab, I'll just blast them away, and that's kind of the idea. If I see a Fire Staff going on point, I'll just blast shot them away, and that's why I've been running that kind of setup a little bit. But this is like a little bit more techie. Like I won't run it for every situation. The IG still generally feels best because IG is stupid. In terms of like your jewelry and what you have, I think there's two main options. Usually, if you go with this kind of setup, you end up with a slash shield ward. You try to do a 5-15 split, so you have 5 towards your physical, 15 towards your elemental, and because of that, you want to have like coverage towards usually strike. If you're OPR, maybe thrust, and that's where I use that slot for on Ankh, or I use it on an amulet with like health strike stam. Both those I think are viable. Also viable to go divine over stam recovery at this point. I think it's honestly debatably even better, just because divine works off your passives, makes your consumes heal more, makes your pots heal more, makes incoming heals heal more. Divine itself on the Ankh is basically as powerful as Ankh is itself, because Ankh's in a contested bucket now and Divine's in its own bucket, which is kind of a weird development. So going Divine on Amulet, very underrated. Ring, usually went Hardy, Refreshing, Purifying Heart. And then if you, for your Earring, you have kind of two options here. Teardrop, you can't get this easily anymore, but you technically still can get it, and you can still craft it. It has a Refreshing Ward, which is the main thing that's nice, and it only drops your gear score by 5 when you go for an Earring at 625, even though its average gear score is like 700, so it's like not that big of a hit to take, and the extra Refreshing Ward definitely feels worth it. Otherwise, Endless Thirst is just super strong right now, definitely worth like considering. In terms of your Heartrune, definitely some options. Bile seems to be the one that my company prefers the most, but if you're being like more offensive, you're trying to go for like trip oriented builds, which is not what I'm doing, I'd say go Vines. If you're more passive, Bile is great. You have a few other options too. Like I think Firestorm is underrated just because it can reduce burn damage and stuff like that, and get rid of the fire stacks on you and the pest stacks. So like a good thing for like OPRs in particular, but less good in like war, where people are just like naturally going to be disease capped anyway. Also gets rid of runs from the VG too, so it has like some kind of nice util there. But definitely options with all. It's kind of a very flexible kit, but the base idea for this is you want to do Invig stacking, you want to do refreshing, make sure you have Mending Vortex, because that's actually a pretty good source of healing, and try to get one Crowded Bludge perk, fill with slash conditioning, fill with health, whatever defensive perk you want. It really does not matter in my opinion. And then kind of run whatever amulet or earring you prefer. It doesn't really matter too much. Offhand, also flexible. Just like in general, it's a very flexible kit that you're like able to do a lot on. The style of this weapon is generally more passive than aggressive, but you can be aggressive depending on your offhand. Like with IG, I will be aggressive and kind of push my limits, especially when I'm running 350 con, because it's like basically impossible to die. Like you actively have to like really mess up to die with this class. I would argue it's like almost easier to play and like live on this class than it is to play on SNS tank. SNS tank is like also like I think a underrated offhand that you could go, but I'm still experimenting with it. Where you go for like flail, you go for butcher, use the butcher to give yourself ult charge, play for the flail and downtime, and then switch to the butcher with the shield to tank during clumps. I think that's underrated. Probably play that with a tower, not with a round, but like it's something that you could do, and that would be kind of an interesting way to build this as well. But yeah, it's just kind of use cooldowns as much as you can. There's not too much to it. You want to usually be leading with your smite in most engagements, and then I'll try to follow up with a vortex so that people can kind of get more active. I'll try to drop a shower behind people, and then I'll turn, hit for a bludge, use my storm to reset my cooldowns, and then I'll go for another smite and kind of do the rotation over and over and over again, because you have so much refreshing. Even in the case like this where I don't have refreshing ward proccing, all my abilities are coming up very, very quickly, and I'm just able to effectively spam them over and over and just inherently get passive value. In terms of the utility that you're providing to your team as a whole at a high level, you're providing weakens, you're providing cleanses, you're giving haste, you're making people immune to roots, you're making people more tanky, you're making people do more damage, you're applying weakens, more weakens, when you block with stability impairment, you're giving your team empower. This ult here is literally just an ult charge, it doesn't really heal people at all, but it's just like overall like a very, very tanky, kind of like an off tank sort of weapon. Like it's definitely not like a main tank sort of thing, but you could definitely use flail for a lot of things, and then just whatever, if you main hand flail, like the main thing is just high uptime, make sure you have a refreshing move. That's the main thing you need to have either on your flail or on your kite shield. Some people prefer to go for plague crits, that's fine as well. You can backstab with your flail abilities, every ability can backstab, and that will guarantee the plague crits, and that will proc. I just don't run it right now, mostly because I kind of think the VGs will have enough of it procced where I don't really need to. And by not doing that, I can get another refreshing ward, get another slash shield ward. It just generally feels better to play with this kind of setup rather than with the plague crit one, but the plague crit one is debatably more utility, so that's an option there. The attunement that I have here, that slot's debatable too, but the idea behind it is if you proc attunement, you get a little bit of ult charge. Technically, shirking is more ult charge, but you shouldn't be dodging with this build with the latest changes. You still should probably be playing this build in heavy, so I would think that attunement's a little bit better, but both those are relatively close. Trenchant Ren's also decent, just to go for like a heavy attack, because sometimes you can close distance by going for a heavy attack, and then you can turn that into an auto, versus like these autos don't have as much reach, and if you don't want to spam dodge in circumstances, like you could just go heavy into auto, and that tends to work out pretty well too. But that's like the base mechanics of like how all the flail stuff works. The rest is like just kind of fine-tuning things and adjusting for a certain situation. It's a very flexible class, so definitely would recommend playing it. And cheers. Peace.